Good afternoon and welcome to our presentation of this national final. I'm Eva, your chair, from Oxford Spires Academy. Olivia will be questioning, also from Oxford Spires, and we're delighted to be hosting Sian from the Cheadle Academy. Sorry, my handwriting isn't very good. Today, Sian has chosen the topic of "The law is rigged for the rich," as they feel that it is important for people to be aware of and understand. She will outline how they feel that the law has been rigged for the rich and famous, talking about the unreliability of the legal system and bringing up examples, such as Jimmy Savile, alongside how money impacts the use of the legal system by rigging it for the rich. I now ask you to join me in a warm round of applause for our main speaker from Cheadle Academy, Sian.
Laws are spider webs through which the big flies pass through and the little flies get caught. So said Honoré de Balzac, French novelist and playwright. These big flies symbolise the celebrities, politicians and wealthy people who easily wease their way through the legal system. Meanwhile, the little flies, the less privileged, get caught, robbed and manipulated by the law. But this raises the question, why did they get away with heinous crimes while potentially we and others like us are thrown aside by a rulebook only intent on protecting its well-off creators? Well, it is simply because our justice system is rigged for the rich. Today, I will talk about our legal system. I will give an example of someone who has escaped the law based on wealth and fame, and I will raise the question as to whether money should play a role when distributing justice. Before I start my speech, I would like to make everyone here aware that I will briefly be covering the topic of abuse against minors. If you find this topic triggering in any way, I will not be offended if you choose to remove yourself from the conversation. With that being said, my first point is that our legal system is unreliable and untrustworthy. This is shown by the sheer amount of people who do not put their faith into the legal system. For example, only 37% of UK citizens place their trust in the professionals controlling the law, and only 1 in 5 people believe that the justice system is fair and transparent. The top 20% of the population, 1 in 5, have a disposable income of around £69,000. Can we make an inference as to who we believe think this system, so obviously rigged in their favour, is fair? Likewise, 67% of the population think that wealth now plays a larger role in distributing justice than it used to. Can you still believe that this clearly corrupt system is unbiased? In my opinion, it's not. My second point is that those who are wealthy and famous tend to get away with crimes a lot easier than others. This is because the law was created to work in their favour. Think about a young child. Think about them being violently pursued and assaulted by someone double, triple, quadruple their age. Would you want justice to be served for them? Would you want to see that person put behind bars? If you're anything like me, the answer is yes. However, this was not the case for the victims of Jimmy Savile, the people's hero, the man who was knighted by our Queen, the man who consistently hid in plain sight. This man preyed on young children, abusing hundreds for his own perverted pleasures. He then showed a complete disregard for people's emotions by consistently saying my court case is next Thursday on national television, mocking the situation to the oblivious world. A criminal's catchphrase. A criminal who was forever brought to the police's attention, yet continually slipped away, not due to his creative cunning, but simply due to his wealth, his fame, and respected name. However, the sheer magnitude of Savile's crimes did come to light after the internet further developed. But the reason justice was never served was because Savile was dead. He had evaded a lifetime in a cell thanks to his fame and wealth. This is one example. There are several others where they are caught and many others where they're not. However, when they are caught, they often get off with a lighter sentencing. My question is, do the few that are make up for those who aren't? My third point is a question. Should money play a role in the legal system? The answer depends on the angle you look at it from. For example, the average cost of a lawyer when they have 4 years of experience is around £289, whereas a potentially better lawyer with 8 years of experience is around £373. This is the same for most jobs, as the higher up the employment ladder you are, the more likely you are to get paid more. I'm aware that not everyone will be able to afford this sum of money when hiring a lawyer, and this is why there is a system in place called legal aid. However, the other thing is the judiciary should not discriminate when putting someone who belongs in prison behind bars simply based on their social standing, nor if justice is required for a person who is potentially less fortunate. Our legal system needs to be equal, and currently things as simple as money are getting in the way of having an unprejudiced system. In my opinion, our legal system, this system that should be known for keeping citizens safe, has taken a drastic turn in favour of the rich and famous. As Oliver Goldsmith, poet, playwright and novelist once said, "Laws grind the poor and the rich men rule the law." As this quote states, the rules the UK citizens are currently obliged to follow do not work in their favour. As of this moment, the justice system is rigged. But one day we could make a change. A conversation is a step towards equality. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Olivia and I have a few questions for you. So firstly, you mentioned Jimmy Savile in your speech. What do you think should happen when criminals die before they get convicted?
When a criminal dies before they get convicted of the crime, it's very ambiguous as to what should happen regarding that crime. As, for example, with Jimmy Savile, there were no real accomplices in what he did. It was him and him alone. Therefore, he was the one who should have been prosecuted for the crime, yet he wasn't. Now, in my opinion, potentially his victims could have received compensation for the crimes that were committed. Another thing that could happen is if there was an accomplice, potentially they could be put behind bars, even if they potentially didn't play as big a part in the crime committed as the actual person.
Sorry, just following on from that, you mentioned compensation. Would that come from the family of the criminal, in this case Jimmy Savile, or where else would it come from?
Say the criminal put something in a will about it, they could potentially try and find the people that have received the money from that criminal and then deal it out to the victims and try and make amends for what has happened to them.
Thanks. And I think we'd all be interested in knowing what ways you would change the legal system to benefit all people.
I believe that the first step that anyone should make is putting aside a prejudice they may have, whether they've been brought up with that belief or they've gained it later on in life. If you are going to make a judgment on a case, you need to take in both sides of the argument and only both sides of the argument. Don't bring in a prejudice such as wealth, if they're famous, their ethnicity, their sexuality, their gender. Don't bring that into the equation unless it is relevant to the case. Start by only taking in both sides and then putting forth a verdict that is proper to the case and the crime that has been committed.
Thanks. And just to play devil's advocate for a moment, you mentioned rich and famous people in your speech who did get caught. Could you name any of these people and explain what they did?
There are several examples. A fairly recent one is Boris Johnson. He was caught breaking the law during lockdown. He actually made that law, which in my opinion makes it a little bit worse. That's obviously your job to make that judgment. However, he was fined. I've done a lot of research into this and I couldn't find a specific statistic. They range from £50 to £2,000. So obviously there's quite a big gap there and I'm not sure if I can put forward any valuable evidence there. However, he was convicted of the crime that he committed and he was fined, which is as it should be for anyone, no matter where they are in society.
Just following on from fines, would you go as far to say that wealthier and famous people should have a harsher fine, a harsher penalty for crimes they commit because they're in the public eye?
In my opinion, yes, they probably should, as they can probably afford it more. Now, obviously, the main thing is how bad the crime is that's been committed. Don't automatically go charging someone more if it's not necessary. However, if it is necessary, get them to pay the amount that is proper to what has happened.
Cool. And you mentioned legal aid in your speech. Could you just elaborate on this for us?
So legal aid is a system in place where they take into account the case, they decide if it's eligible, if the person can't pay the money to get a lawyer, and then they are offered a sum of money to put forward to hiring a lawyer that can then better their chances in the courtroom. Now, if this person then does receive compensation, they will potentially have to pay it back, so it is not a set-in-stone method. However, it is there to assist from the get-go so that people going into the courtroom don't have to feel constantly unprepared.
And where would this money come from?
I believe it's from the government.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
And now, I'd now like to open the floor to any audience questions we may have. Yes, in the blue. Do we have a? I don't know. Yeah, you don't want to. Yeah. Okay.
You said about compensation and it possibly being taken from people who get it from wills, but the thing is, why should someone's inheritance be taken away from them because of something their parent, sibling, loved one, friend did?
That is a very valuable point, actually. And I believe that while that is potentially my viewpoint, I understand where you're coming from with that. And definitely, the family should not suffer from what the person has done. However, I can't see where else it can be taken from where it's still fair on the victims, as ultimately they are the ones who have suffered the absolute most at the hands of that person. So I assume that it could potentially be taken from the government or anything else, but I personally believe that taking it from the will is the most valuable answer to the question.
Any more? Yes?
So you mentioned in your speech about both wealthy and famous people. Do you think they get treated? Do you think wealthy people get treated differently from famous people in the judicial system?
It depends. Fame and wealth often go hand in hand when considering crime, as if you are famous, you're more likely to be wealthy. However, there are instances where it's potentially a privileged background and a wealthy background that have got you that money and not necessarily fame. So while they often go hand in hand, they can also be on very different ends of the spectrum when considering what has actually happened within the courtroom.
Thank you very much. Well done. I would like to thank Olivia for her questions and to Sian for her speech. In summary, Sian highlighted important points surrounding their topic of the law is rigged for the rich, such as how people who are less privileged are more likely to be entrapped in the legal system as it is unreliable and untrustworthy, as very few people trust or think it's transparent enough. She talked about legal aid, which is available for those who cannot afford the huge sums of money required for the legal advice and lawyers. Sian brought up examples such as Jimmy Savile and how the children he abused were never given retribution due to his wealth, fame, and his name, which helped emphasise their key message that the legal system is inherently flawed and biased towards those who are rich and famous. Olivia then helped widen our views by asking questions about what should happen to criminals if they die before they can be convicted, such as Jimmy Savile, to which Sian answered saying they felt compensation could be given from the estate of the perpetrator or criminal, which was then critiqued during the audience questioning, or the accomplices could be convicted instead. Olivia asked about how the legal system could be changed, to which Sian said could be done by attempting to remove bias from lawyers and everyone involved in the legal system. I'm sure you're all sick of thank yous. There's been a lot of them today, and there'll be many more to come, I would imagine. But I would just like to say thank you to the judges, the audience, ESU-Churchill College, everyone who's competed in all the rounds of the competition up to this point. Obviously, everyone that competed today, all the support staff and everything like that. And of course, for our questioner, Olivia, and our speaker, Sian. Thank you.